Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. I'm David Bird with Reality Reimagined. I'm an award-winning photographer and Photoshop artist that specializes in fantasy composite art. And today we're going to have episode 8 of the shop vlog, where I'm going to be editing one of my images for a change. The shop vlog is where I take an image from start to art and explain the entire process and my thoughts as an artist as we go through the edit in Photoshop. But I'm excited to work on this image today because we're going to be editing a natural light image. Now, when I started my career in photography over 20 years ago, I was fortunate enough to start with strobes. So natural light photography came much later in the process for me. And so I don't do it very often, therefore I don't get to edit a lot of natural light images in Photoshop. So I'm really excited today to see how we can add some colors and go through the color grading process with this natural light image, as well as all the other basics of retouching and so forth. So let's hit up Photoshop and begin episode 8 of color grading natural light. Introductions, as always, to get us started. This is my wonderful friend Danielle. You can see more of her amazing artwork by visiting the Instagram account at the link below. So let's talk about this image and the photography and some of the plans for the edit before we continue forward. So natural light image, she's standing next to a window on camera left. There's a lot of light cascading in. I love this narrow band of darkness that we see. And on set, I was interested with the second window here being an anchor or a bookend to the two lights, and then letting that narrow band in the middle be an interesting factor. But as I look at it, I'm not entirely sure I like all of this light on the right side of the document. I feel like it's going to pull focus and be a distraction, so I'm probably going to do something about that once we get into Photoshop. Now, with a picture of a human subject, we always want to connect with her eyes. Since she's wearing the sunglasses, we can't see her eyes. I love this hot band of light that is on her face, and I want to preserve this as much as possible and let this, being the brightest part of illumination, pull the audience into her face and connect with her just a little bit more. So as we work with this image in raw processing and in retouching and so forth, I'm going to try to preserve that as much as possible. As far as the color grade is concerned, which is the interesting part that I think will be the interesting part of the edit of this image, I'm interested in working with adding, obviously colors to the highlights and into the shadows. And since we have such interesting faded highlights, because this is an actual sun flare that's coming in off camera left, where the sun is capturing just a little bit of the glass and creating that flare, I'm curious to see the quality of color that will be in these highlights, as well as the quality of color over here where we just have normal illumination. There's not any of that light flare. And then balancing some colors into the shadows. Now, my initial plan for the color palette is to use red and green because of her shirt. I'll probably put the red into the highlights and the green into the shadows. I'll definitely probably flip it just to see. Right now, I gotta be honest, I'm not feeling it because I just don't think it's going to, it like red and green, those are roses, sure, but it's also Christmas colors, holiday colors, winter holiday colors, and I'm just like, I'm not sure if I want to do that. So we'll see, but we'll explore some different options of color grading just to start working other colors and see what really resonates and fits. So camera, I'm using the Canon EOS R. I'm using a Canon EF 85mm 1.4 prime lens. I was at ISO 50 and then a shutter speed of 1/160th of a second. So that's the photography, that's the cameras, that's all the settings and so forth. Let's get started with the edit. Now, when I edit my own images in Photoshop, first and foremost, I listen to music all the time. So I kind of want to listen to music, so I'm going to listen to it on my phone so that I don't give the copyright censors on YouTube anything to think about today. And hopefully I don't talk louder because I think you can't hear me because I can... Is that coming from the computer speak? Oh no, it's coming from... It sounded so real, like it was coming from my desktop speakers instead of my ear. But these are really good Bose earbuds, man. They're amazing. I tell you, it's way too loud. It's too loud. All right, so and then the next thing is, when I record YouTube content, I typically reduce my desktop settings to 1600 by 900 so that everything is bigger so that you all can read the words and the sliders and all that kind of fliz. But I have a 4K monitor and my desktop resolution in its native state is much, much bigger than that. So I've reverted it back to that. So hopefully you can make things out as I'm working today. If you can't, my apologies. It's just really hard for me to actually edit for the first time on an image when it's 1600 by 900. It's just big and it just looks funky on this monitor. So anyway, let's get started in Adobe Camera Raw. The first thing that I want to do is always come down to the optics tab here and check these two boxes, remove chromatic aberrations and use profile corrections. The built-in corrections in my lens are recorded to the image itself, so it knows what to do. Now, when I do the use profile corrections, it's obviously making the image much brighter because it's removing some of the vignetting that happens with that 85 prime lens. I love the lens, by the way, great color, color and a lot of beautiful quality to it, but it definitely, once we correct that, it makes it brighter. Now you're also seeing splotches of red on her face and here, and that's because I've turned on the highlight warning here, the clipping warning. So this is showing me that anywhere that's blown out where data is going to be lost, that's where it's going to be. And I will see that here by those red dots. So that's going to help dictate the next step that I take under the basic tab in Adobe Camera Raw. I'm just going to pull the highlights down. And my goal is to pull them down until those red spots just disappear. I don't want to take them completely out because I'm fighting that narrow band of light. Now that I've said that and I look at it, it does look cool and it's interesting, but I'm not sure this is exactly what I want. So I'm going to pull the highlights back until we see that red just disappear and right about there. So we're at -31. But this is part of my artistic process. Like, first from a logical perspective, I'm like, I got to pull the highlights down because they're blowing out. And then as I did, I went slowly, then I took it all the way, and I like what I see for both. So I want to not necessarily limit myself as much as possible. So right now I know that once I'm done moving all these other sliders and so forth, I'm going to open this image as a smart object. When you open a raw file into Adobe Camera Raw and you make changes and then you choose to open it as a smart object and not just a standard PSD file, you're actually preserving the raw file as a raw file. So you can pull it right back into Adobe Camera Raw and make further changes as you need to. And I'm going to show you all that here in just a minute. So highlights are good for now. Let's take the shadows out just a touch. If we do, we're seeing that highlight warning come back. So let's go ahead and pull the highlights down just a little bit more. Okay, the white point, if I push it up, we're just going to get those clipping warnings. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the whites down just a little bit more. And the black point, which is increasing it across the image. I'm going to minimize that here just a little bit because I'm going to come to dehaze. Dehaze, I've often said, is like contrast 2.0 because it does a wonderful job of adding contrast to the luminosity values as well as color, but it's really meant to get rid of the haze. Now, there's a lot of haze in this because this is an actual light flare that's coming in from the sun in that window where the light just got into the lens just a little bit to create this quality of light that we see on document left. So if I push dehaze, for instance, all the way, we can certainly remove a majority of that haze. And this is now a much more contrasted, vibrant, pretty, colorful picture. And that's interesting on its own too. And I might go that direction, including pulling the highlights out and so forth. But let's try to stick true to the original image first and what was exciting to me when I was on set. So I'm going to give it just a push of dehaze, but not too much. Let's go ahead and give it some actual real contrast and see what we can shore up there in the luminosity values. I think that looks good. Not even gonna touch exposure. Go ahead and give it a little touch of vibrance and saturation. There you go. Make sure those match. I always do. There's no major reason why. I just make sure the vibrance and saturation match here when I slide them. Orange. Orange, you glad you're not a banana. Under the color mixer, let's go ahead and the saturation of orange I think is fine, but let's just push it up just a little bit. We don't need to mess with the luminance. I like what we see there. The yellows, let's find out where those are. It's in her hair and that window in the background. So let's go ahead and shift the hue of the yellow more toward orange just to make sure that it's playing in that realm. And I'm going to go ahead and increase the saturation just a little bit. Now, as I do, it's obviously increasing the clipping warning, as you can see on her forehead and her face. So I'm just going to pull it down just a bit until I know that it's not going to clip and cause any data loss there. So the rest of this, we're not going to mess with right now. And I think all of this looks fine for now. So I'm going to open the image as a smart object. Now, here is where I would click open, and if I just hit open, it's going to open the file as a PSD file, which is a Photoshop document. But if I hold the shift key, it will convert that button to open object, which means now it's going to open it as a smart object. So when I do this, I have the smart object here in my layer stack. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this so that I can use that duplicate and take it back into Adobe Camera Raw and experiment and make with some changes just to see where I want to go. This is very important though, and I've talked about this in a previous video on a shop vlog. When you have a smart object in Photoshop, first, any layer can be converted to be a smart object except adjustment layer. So any standard layer that you would have of a picture or a texture can become a smart object. But when you open a raw file for the first time and choose to open as a smart object, to duplicate it, one would think you would hit Control or Command on the letter J to duplicate. You don't want to do that because you make an exact duplicate of the smart object. So when you take that second version of the smart object into Camera Raw and make some changes, both smart objects will change at the same time because they're living duplicates of each other. They're linked to a degree. if I right click anywhere where there's not a word or the thumbnail and come down here where it says new smart object via copy, that's what you want to do, because now it's making a new smart object that's completely separate from the first one, but they're identical. They look the same, but they're completely separate from each other. So that on this second one, when I double click it, it will take me back into Adobe Camera Raw, and I can make changes to just this one, and the first one will be preserved the way it was. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and go in that direction of pulling the highlights down and taking that dehaze up significantly. Gosh, I'm really digging that. But I love that light flare that's coming in at the same time. Man. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to push the dehaze up just a touch more. Take the highlights out just a little bit more. I'm going to increase the white point. I'm starting to see a little bit of the flirting of the clipping on her forehead, but I can live with that. I'm going to pull the black point out, and this is why I want to use a smart object, because all the original sliders that I moved with the first one, they're still here where they were. I'm not having to overcome what I did or try to make up for it or change it. So let's pull the black point out just a little bit more. Let's take the contrast down. Yeah, and then let's give it a touch of exposure. I'm trying to lift the shadows just a little bit. Now that we made everything so much darker by taking the highlights out and moving dehaze, I'm trying to make it just a touch brighter. Ooh, man, I like this too. This sucks. This is what happens to me all the time when I do my work. Like my knowledge set and so forth, and I'm not trying to say this to be arrogant or boast, but like my knowledge set, I could edit a photo in 20 minutes. The reason why it takes an hour is because I'm like, I don't know which one I want. I want chicken and I want steak. I want fettuccine alfredo and lasagna. I want Merlot and Pinot Noir. I'm hungry. So, all right. I think this is good. We're going to have some color problems here because there's a lot of orange on her face, but not on her hand, but we can fix that during the retouch. Okay. I'm going to say, okay. So it's going to prepare the smart object, and now we have two versions. Oh, man. Which one do you all like? Let me know in the comments below. I'll wait. Waiting. I'm really just thinking about fettuccine alfredo with broccoli and chicken, fresh shaved Parmesan, big glass of Pinot Noir. Oh, gosh. I'm going to have to make pasta tonight for dinner. I was going to make Mexican food, but now I'm going to have to make pasta. I love to cook, by the way. I'm just going to go cook. I don't want to be a photographer anymore. All right. So, okay. I'm going with this one. I'm choosing door number 2, Photoshop Johnny. What's behind door number 2? A lifetime subscription to Adobe Photoshop. That would be actually quite saving. So I'm going to select both of these layers, and I'm going to right click somewhere where there's not a word or the thumbnail and come down to rasterize layers, which means they will now no longer be smart objects. And I'm doing that in prep to make a layer mask on it to start painting it. I didn't have to do that for the layer mask. I'm just doing it because I want to. So I have a white layer mask on this, which means if I paint black, I'm talking louder because I think you all can't hear me because this song is really loud. So B for brush, I'm changing the flow of my brush to 10%. I have an opacity of 100% for the brush. I'm going to make sure that my foreground color is set to black by hitting the letter X on my keyboard. And I'm going to start painting at a flow of 10%. Let's make sure that I'm on my soft round. Okay, good. Because I want to just build up and see if I can bring some of that highlight back in. Just a little bit to get a hint of it. And see if I can have like the best of both worlds. Yeah. And then maybe just off of the inside of her elbow just a little bit here. Let's paint up just a touch. I'm going to change my flow to 5% because it's building up too quick. And I'm not getting all the control that I'm looking for. I'm so making fettuccine Alfredo. Okay, so I think that looks good. I'm going to change my flow to 100% and just make sure that I have it off her armpit here and just the inside of the crevice there, just a little bit. Change my flow back to 10 and just feather it out just a little bit more to make sure that we preserve the natural shadows that are there. Oh, wait, no. Let's do it this way. I'm holding Shift and clicking the layer mask, which deactivates it for a moment so you can see the full version of the top layer without the effects of the layer mask. So in a way, doing before the before and after. Okay. Right click, deleting the layer mask. I'm just going with door number 2, Johnny, all the way. I love that light flare. I think it's slick and cool, but there's just something about this that I really dig. So we're going to keep it this way. So I'm going to go ahead and flatten the whole thing. I'm working destructively because this is my own artwork and I can do what I want. So I'm working destructively, which means I flattened it. Now I'm ready to start with the Retouch 3.0 action. So I'm going to go ahead and click it. Now this is the part of the video that I typically just move past, so you don't have to see me doing the dodging and the burning and all of that fliz and the cleaning up skin distractions and the mixer brush and all of that. But if you would like to see that, if you are new to the channel, welcome to Reality Reimagined on the YouTubes. If you would like to understand how to do frequency separation, dodging, and burning, and the basics of retouching, take a look at the card above. It will take you to the retouching series when you're done with this video today. There are in-depth guides in there to show you how to do all of those major retouching techniques, and there is a video on that series called a free Retouch 3.0 action. It will give you this specific action that I actually use. When you go to that video, just make sure to look at the description below in that video, and it will give you a link to a Google Drive where you can download the Retouch 3.0 action. So all the layers are being populated for frequency separation, dodging, and burning, and enhancing the eyes. And now I'm ready to do all of that. So give me a minute to listen to some music, do my thing. I'll be back in just a moment. Retouch complete. And I think it actually looks really cool. So here's what I didn't expect. I thought color grading would be like a lot of fun, and I'm sure it's about to be here in a second, would be a lot of fun with a natural light image, but I actually had a lot of fun with dodging and burning during the retouching process and adding some more artificial highlight and shadow into the scene. It just was a different dynamic than what I've done before in studio lighting controlled environments with strobes and so forth. So I dug that part of it, but let's just do a brief recap of what happened through all of this. So here's the original image the way it was. Here it is afterwards. So let's look at some of the basic things that I did with the mixer brush and painting. So first and foremost, all of these lights and shadows and reflections and so forth, I minimized all of that by simply using the mixer brush, pulling down colors, pushing them around, using the basic brush on a blank layer to paint them into the scene to get rid of some of those distractions. I'm essentially painting on this image like a traditional painter would on a canvas and being able to put all of that together. Using the clone stamp tool to remove just a few distractions that I saw in the skin, but nothing major. The dodging and burning was the key here and was exciting to do. So let's just take a look at the before and after without dodge and burn. This is the after globally with dodge and burn. Here's the before. Before, after, before, after. So look at places like through here, the shadow regions where the hair meets her neck. There's natural shadows there and so forth. We can augment that with the burn. Look at her lips and facial structure and so forth, the three-dimensionality that I'm bringing out with the dodge and burn. Look at the interest in the clothing and all the ripples and so forth that we can see. I can bring those out with dodge and burn. So dodging and burning is such a key factor in retouching, but it was much more impactful with this image in natural light and all this wonderful cascading of faded light because of the light flares, the actual light sources, and the true luminosity values. One of the last things I do want to point out though is color correcting of the skin itself. So I talked about this where the hand here didn't have the same quality and color tone as the face. So here is a gradient adjustment map where I simply brought that in. So let's look at the before and after. This is the after. Look at the hand and look at the color. Before, after, before, and after. So making sure that those colors unify and match all the other existing colors that's in the skin. Now, there is a wonderful third-party program that you can use called Infinite Unify. It's a fantastic program that makes it very easy to unify skin tones. There's a video on the channel showing you all about that program and how to use it. I did it by hand here from a technique that I learned from Pratik Nayak, who's the person who made this, one of the team that made the program of Infinite Unify. So you don't necessarily have to buy the program, but it makes it so efficient and time efficient for you to be able to unify skin tones using that plugin. So at this point, I think everything looks good. I'm going to go ahead and come to the topmost layer here and the dodge and burn stack. I'm going to hit Control Alt Shift and E for everything, or Command Option Shift and E on a Mac. That will make a composite layer of all of the active layers. So we now have one layer that looks like everything that we did after the retouch. I right clicked the layer, making a duplicate. I'm coming here to make a new document with this one layer so that it'll be Untitled 3, and it's just the single layer by itself. And now we have our original image here with all the layers of the retouch in case I need to call back to it. So let's start the color grading journey with this, and we'll start with that red and green. So easiest way to do this, again, many different ways to color grade, and if you're an intermediate advanced user of Photoshop, there's certainly bazillions of ways to do this. I'm trying to make sure that we create some interesting steps that folks can replicate if they're new to Photoshop, as well as intermediate and advanced. So I'm going to hit B for brush, and I'm going to hold the Alt or Option key, and I'm going to sample some of the red from the flowers like right there. And that's going to make my foreground color here that color. Then I'm going to hit the letter X to switch my foreground color to the other one. Then B for brush, hold the Alt or Option key and come down here and click on the green. So now my foreground and background colors are these two colors. And the reason why I did that is because I want to start the color grade process with solid color adjustment layers. And when I go to make that adjustment layer, it's going to draw off of whatever your foreground color is. So I'm going to come down to the adjustment window icon here in the layers window and make a solid color adjustment layer. Now it pulls up the color picker, but it's obviously populating the green that we just sampled in our foreground color here. So I'm just going to hit OK. Now it's filled the entire screen with the color. We need to choose a blending mode to make this work. So what I want to do is come down to overlay and start. Let's go soft light. Soft light is about a 25% reduction or so of overlay. So I like the way that looks across the entire image, and that by itself I think is kind of fine, but let's go ahead and make that second one and make the red solid color adjustment layer. Now to make sure that it populates the foreground color to red, I'm gonna hit the letter X so it switches those two colors. Then make a solid color adjustment layer. There's the red, hit OK. And I'm going to come to lighten because I want to lighten up everything with these colors just a little bit and start there with that blending mode. Now, that by itself is a color grade. And it looks interesting and it's neat. And this certainly makes this as kind of a funky piece. And you could leave it just there. And I am pleasantly surprised, and I am not too proud to admit that I might have been wrong. I'm kind of digging the red and green being combined just a little bit. I didn't think I'd like it. I kind of like it. So let's go ahead and redo. No, you know what? Let's use blend if. So I'm going to come down to the bottom of the layer window here where it says FX and choose the first thing that says blending options. It's going to bring up the layer style dialog so that we can come down here to the blend if section. So I'm going to say that I want the underlying hold on. I want the reds to be in the highlights and I want the greens to be in the shadows. So I'm going to say that I want the underlying layer shadows to come up and through so that they will pass through this red because we're blending it. So I'm going to move the triangle, which is going to look really funky on the screen because it's not being feathered right now. It's just a one solid global change. And even that's kind of interesting. So now right there, I'm going to hold Alt or Option, and when I do, it will split the triangle and start feathering the effect. And I'm going to push it back just a little bit so we get some of that weird pattering, the P word, a pattern. There's just a little weird like pattern as it's blending that I think is kind of neat. It's like a almost funky stylized effect. Here, like look back here, you can see the banding here in the colors, and that's what I was talking about with the weird patterning, but whatever. Patterning. More pattern? Patterni? Okay, I think that looks pretty good, so I'm gonna hit OK. We've done a nice blend if. We've got that red in the highlights, the green is the base. Let's change the blending mode to screen. Ooh, screen isn't too intense. Color dodge is gonna be even worse. It's like she's looking out the window during a nuclear holocaust. Look at the bright, shiny mist. No, it's not good. Linear dodge, no. Soft light. I'm liking that though. It's pretty intense, but I'm liking that. So again, that blend if is coming into play. If we did not have the blend if, just give you a brief view, that's what it would look like with the soft light. And if we turn off the green is certainly playing a part into it. So what I was trying to do with these two solid color adjustment layers was to think about where I wanted the colors to be. I want the red to be in the highlights and the green in the shadows. So I was trying to do the blend if in different blending modes in that regard, but never underestimate that you can simply use these two solid color adjustment layers that, again, the color palette's being derived by the clothing that she's wearing, so there is some unity there. On the same blending modes, the same opacities, no blend ifs, and it just works. So I'm kind of digging this too. I like this late sunset kind of feel. Again, the green has to be there. Otherwise, it's just two magenta reds. The green's giving it some balance. I'm going to double click and change the green and make it brighter, because it's going to let it be a little bit more vibrant and take over in the scene. Obviously, as we can see, if I saturate it more, we get too much green. If I take it here, we're not really getting any at all. Let's saturate it, but move it over to a darker tone of green. I'm kind of liking that just a little bit. So hit OK. Let's go ahead and take the red now and make it just a touch brighter. Yeah, because I don't like how dark all of this is, and that's a part of the soft light blending mode. So by making the colors just a touch brighter, we're starting to get a little bit more feeling there. If I take it this way, we're getting grays. Let's take it up right about there. Again, the green is mixing with it, the reds are mixing, and I like this balance. I really do. I think this looks pretty slick. But you know what? Let's put these into a group. So I'm holding Shift and selecting both of them and hitting Control or Command and the letter G for group, and I'm going to turn those off. So here we are with our original layer. Let's duplicate this by hitting Control or Command and the letter J, and then let's take this into Adobe Camera Raw as a filter. So I'm going to hit Control Shift and A or Command Shift and A on a Mac. And that'll pull us back into Adobe Camera Raw so we can come down to the split toning section. I've said this in the retouching series that this is the poor man's color grade. Let's go back to the original purposes of adding that red orange to the highlights. We'll increase the saturation so we can see it roughly to 50. Then take the hue to green, increase the saturation to 50 to get that even mix. So this was my plan. This is what I was expecting to see. When I look at this, I don't like this at all. If you do, sorry. I don't. I just think it looks weird. Like, I just don't like that mix of colors. And I'm totally biased. Blue is my favorite color, and then purple and magenta is like a close second. So I'm just not digging this. No, I don't like that at all. I mean, the ones that I would typically explore for the highlights is like an orange for the highlights, and then a teal blue for the shadows. Now that's speaking my language, but that's still, I mean, I like this, but that's not as cool as what we just did. Let's do purple orange. Let's stay in the orange there. Let's go to the purples. No, that's just silly. Just sillies. Okay, so I'm going to hit cancel because I don't like that. I like what we did with this group. Yeah, I'm digging that. It's like this warm, like sunset kind of feel. We still have the haze and the natural light that's coming into play. I'm going to open up this group and get these out of the group. And then just delete the folder that says group, delete group, thank you. And we'll delete that duplicate so that we just have those. I want more light into this. And we could use adjustment layers. So let's go to curves and let's push the highlights just a touch. Yeah, we're getting that hot spot now back that's driving us right into her face. I'm liking that. Let's push up just a little bit to give just a gentle fill to the midtones where we're adding just a little bit more light. And now let's bring the shadows over, which should increase that contrast in those shadow tones just a smidge. Yeah, I like that. So again, what I say all the time about Photoshop, subtlety is key inside of Photoshop. We just made those little adjustments, but look at that, how much of a difference it makes. Yeah, it's really slick. I like that. Okay, so here's what I find fascinating. When I teach, and I've been very blessed to teach, and I love doing it. I love encountering folks and passing on education. I get such a wonderful thrill of seeing people exceed their own expectations in art. It's magical to me. I don't have all the answers. I've been doing this for 20 years. And I didn't think this would work. I thought for sure, as I was planning out this video, I'm like, I'm gonna have to use LUTs and some other crap and whatever else, and I'm just gonna fall back to teal and orange because why? And this, I dig this. And this would not have happened, and I guarantee you, I'm gonna store this away on my brain. This would not have happened had I not experimented by using what I consider to be common sense when it comes to, well, what colors should I use? Well, I looked at her shirt and went, well, there's obvious color. And these combos with the simple blending modes of soft light combined together with just a little bit of paying attention to luminosity, I think it looks spectacular. And I dig it. So let's go ahead and finish the fundamentals. We've done color, luminosity, now let's go to detail. So I've come to the topmost layer. I'm hitting Control, Alt, Shift, and E to make a composite layer of all of this. Then I'm going to come up to Filter, Other, and High Pass. High Pass is one of my favorite ways initially to start adding some interesting contrast and texture to the scene. So the High Pass filter, I recommend a radius between 1 and 3. Anything higher than 3, you're going to start getting a lot of haloing around the edges, and that can look pretty funky. So now, you know, it looks like the screen is nothing, but we can see that the high pass is adding some detail to this. We just need to pick a blending mode. So usually a hard light or vivid light is the most powerful version of that high pass to really sharpen things up. It's a minimal change just from here, but I like what I see. Let's go to vivid light. Linear light, excuse me, is the one that is the strongest. My bad. Yeah, I'm liking that sharpening. It's a little too much. I want to take it back into camera raw. So I'm going to take it to overlay just to give us our first general pass with that high pass. We're back on linear. Let's go back to overlay. There we go. Because I want to take the whole thing now back into Adobe Camera Raw. This is a typical process I go through at the very end of artwork just to finalize all of it just a little bit. So I'm going to make another composite layer by hitting Control, Alt, Shift, and E. Then go into Adobe Camera Raw as a filter by hitting Control, Shift, and A or Command, Shift, and A on a Mac. So let's go ahead and increase the sharpening here in the details slider section here to like +20. Let's give it some more texture and just a little bit of clarity. And we'll hit that dehaze one more time. We'll increase the white point across the scene just a little bit more. Bring that black point down. Let's pull out the shadows. There we go. Highlights up just a smidge and a little bit of contrast. Pretty much the same things we did when we were preparing the raw file in the first place. And this is just a finalization step that I really dig. And then hit OK. That's pretty slick to me. I dig it. I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to duplicate this top layer by hitting Controller Command letter J. Go back into Adobe Camera Raw as a filter. I'm going to reduce the overall exposure by a lot. And then hit OK. Now I'm going to put a white mask, layer mask onto this to reveal the entire effect. And then I'm going to start painting black onto the mask to start taking it away. And I'm essentially creating a vignette. I'm going to go to a flow of 10% and just trying to use the direction of lights by adding shadows to the scene to help pull focus to Danielle. I'm going to change, my flow is at 10%, that's good. Let's go ahead and make the brush just a little bit bigger and feather off this effect and let it trail away. So those windows are still there and some good luminosity, but they're not at risk of pulling focus. And I'm using this band right through here of darkness as the perimeter edge of how far I'm going to go. Yeah, I think that's really slick. And look at how much of a difference that makes as it drives us into Danielle. Beautiful. I'm done. I'm good. I'm spent. I'm finished. Drop on my camera, drop on the mic. I'm going to hit F4 to flatten the entire thing. And then let's just grab the original image for the before and after, Johnny. That's where we started. That's where we end. Frequency separation, dodging and burning. We didn't have to enhance the eyes because of the sunglasses. Thinking about colors, experimenting, using solid color adjustment layers. No fancy third-party plugins, no weird, hard-to-find things under the menus, just simple stuff. Using our imagination, using creativity, color harmony, and theory. I really like it. I hope Danielle likes the picture too. Okay, so this finishes up episode 8 of the shop vlog. So let's have some final thoughts and finish the video for today. Sometimes I feel like a broken record. I keep repeating the same fundamentals, the same mantras and ideas all the time. Subtlety is key inside of Photoshop. You have to learn why things work in Photoshop. Color, luminosity, and detail, and experimentation. Experimentation is one of the fastest, most efficient ways for you to discover your own artistic style and to be able to create the artwork that pleases you in Photoshop. Had we not done this video today, I was convinced that red and green were just not going to work and I was going to ditch it within seconds. Had I not went through that process and challenged not only my own precepts of what I thought I was going to do, but my own skill set in Photoshop, I created something now that I will remember. And I will continue to push that boundary within myself as an artist and my knowledge in Photoshop, and my art will become stronger for it. So I constantly encourage you, among all the other things that I've talked about, keep experimenting, keep pushing your boundaries in Photoshop, your knowledge and your skill sets, and try things just to see what's possible. That's the end of today's episode. If you like the content you found in today's video, make sure to give the video a like and consider subscribing to the channel because new content debuts each week in photography and Photoshop education. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of that new content when you return to the YouTubes. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, I'll see you out there in the world of Photoshop.